Hello and welcome to Connotation Points video Snark. I'm making my way through Stalking Jack the Ripper by Kerri Maniscalco. If you haven't seen the other videos about the book, please make sure that you do, or else you might be confused. Links will be posted below. Chapter 11, Something Wicked, Jolly Jack Public House, London, 13th of September 1888. After getting lost following the man's poor directions, Audrey and Thomas find themselves at a public house. Audrey gives up all pretenses of actually being a lady and just strides in, and promptly strides herself out the back door, with Thomas on her heels. There they uncover the horrifyingly cutthroat bar glasses black market that's apparently being run. Alrighty then. They go back inside to try and find their man. I honestly have no idea what the point of them walking through the back was, but here we are. The men at the bar kind of laugh at Audrey for a moment, but she maintains her earlier pretense and acts like the police are about 5 seconds away from bursting in and arresting people for the black market that they've got running. Yeah, I still can't get over how somebody would care so much about, what was that again? Illegal drinking glasses? I cannot. The lady who is working at the bar tells him that he's out back, which we all know that he's not, and also tells them to carry a message that includes a lot of waving a knife around. But they still go back outside, where, much to everybody's surprise, in the minute since Audrey and Thomas popped inside, the man still hasn't returned, but they do find a little bit of blood on the ground, and Thomas instructs the dog to find the trail, which he does. They follow the dog for a while, where they find the man. Audrey is convinced that the dude is only just drunk and cut his finger or something on one of the glasses, but then Audrey goes over to him and they discover that his throat has been slashed. Divorce yourself from emotions, Audrey Rose. See it like an equation that needs solving. That's all it is now. It's going to be all right. This isn't helpful, dude. I think that it's perfectly normal for people to be a little disturbed upon finding a murdered man. Audrey ends up being taken home by a police officer. She's described as being covered in the dead man's blood, although she barely even touched him. This displeases the aunt something fierce and promises a stern lecture later, like, "Excuse me for having stumbled upon a dead body." The actual plot trickles in between moments of Audrey feeling guilty over not having gotten to the scene in time, and under normal circumstances, I might file this scene under acceptable writing. She just witnessed something insanely traumatic, so of course she's not thinking right. But with every single page of this book dripping with unnecessary descriptions, it just feels like business as usual to me. I knew nothing regarding Mr. Dunlap and his personal life, so I hadn't the slightest clue who would wish him dead. Was it someone he worked with? At least she has enough common sense to realize that, maybe this wasn't about Leather Apron. Unfortunately, I've read more than enough young adult books to know that this is totally going to be, but here we are. The whole crew of the Mary C. certainly appeared capable of murder, but looks had a troubling way of being deceiving. Mother used to read stories from books she'd bought from Grandma's. At first I turned my nose up at them, thinking nothing good could come from such battered covers. I'd been snobbish and wrong. The words written between those crinkled pages were magical, like a fairy princess hidden amongst paupers. Mother taught me judging something from its outward appearance was silly, a lesson I tried remembering often. 100 words when 7 would have done. Nathan finishes speaking with the officer who brought Audrey home and then rejoins his sister. He's at least sorry that Audrey had to see any of that. Audrey says that she's going to go get changed and that she needs to speak with Thomas immediately. Thomas does nothing to stop her and only asks that she get home before it gets too late. Audrey then compromises and says that she'll invite Thomas over instead. Nathan gets all mother hen and starts talking about proper distance that the two of them are to sit apart and that they aren't to be in a closed room alone. Nathan starts to say something about their father, and then Aunt Amelia makes her first physical appearance. She talks some about some man, and I really don't care because this is the first time that any of this has been mentioned at all. But the guy that father has apparently been talking to is a potential suitor for Audrey. She protests over this because she hasn't even come out yet and won't for another year. Audrey brings up the murder investigation, but Amelia is honestly more concerned about making a good match for Audrey. And, I get it. It's bad for a woman in Europe in pretty much any time except for the 21st century. Women couldn't own property or vote or even hold a lot of jobs, which is why you often hear about desolate women turning towards prostitution. If something were to happen to all of Audrey's family, she wouldn't be able to inherit anything and would likely be turned out onto the streets. Ensuring that your daughter marries well is not without reason. Remember, guys, the idea of marrying for love is a fairly recent one. But the book wants to paint Aunt Amelia as some kind of bitter harpy for wanting all of this for Audrey. Except it was 100% normal for this kind of thing to be going on. The author is just biased in her 21st century thinking and views women of this time period as being repressed. They were by our standards, but honestly, not even remotely trying to write anything period accurate. And I'm still waiting for Audrey to even so much as mention going to a suffrage meeting. Anyway, Audrey thinks of how Thomas has been openly flirting with her recently. Up until this exact moment, she just kind of assumed that he was doing it for fun, but now she's like, wait, what if he views himself as a potential suitor? Amelia then tells Audrey point blank that if she continues to work for Uncle, who is her brother, so they're not married like I'd originally thought, then it would cause another relapse for Audrey's father. And wow, just wow, what a thing to say to somebody. I'm not joking. That's horrible. Hey kids, do you want to know why your daddy drinks? Because you're a horrible little So cheerful. That's not going to create a boatload of problems in the future for anybody. Nope. Nathaniel takes off with a cheerful, have fun. Amelia then sets on Audrey and starts issuing orders left and right. Ugh. Chapter 12, Family Ties, Wadsworth Residence, Belgrave Square, 13th of September, 1888. It now didn't seem to bother her that I'd found a murdered man so long as I'd created pretty violets and swirling vines to make up for breaking social taboos. Right. Once again, so sorry that I just happened to come across a murdered man. No thought about how this might affect her delicate sensibilities. Audrey is clearly the one at fault here. Mercifully, the aunt fussing over Audrey happens largely off-page. She goes to bed, which leaves Audrey to talk about what happened with Thomas. Thomas says that the police think that the man's throat was slashed with the gear. He explains to Audrey that it's not hard to turn practically anything into a weapon. Audrey can only just think of how gears were found at the other crime scenes and that it can't possibly be a coincidence. Thomas is pleased by her thinking, but rather than trying to puzzle out what it could possibly mean, he only just wants to dance with her. Because reasons. I'm not even going to pretend to understand what's going on right now. But then Thomas says that he's certain that somebody must have overheard them on the ship talking about that man, which is why he was murdered, and there is enough of a possibility that it could be true. But Audrey feels like she needs more evidence other than just a lot of ifs. They randomly talk about Audrey being thrown into the Tower of London, which, yeah, I'm still scratching my head over the entire thing. Thomas then almost kisses Audrey, but some noise pulls them apart again. He then jumps back to looking through Uncle's notebook like nothing had happened. Audrey then fumes, more at herself for having almost kissed him than anything, even though she was totally into it. Father hadn't allowed friends into our home while we were growing up, with that influenzas and potential pox contaminations, so I'd never had a best friend before and missed out on those sorts of relationships. I've read a lot of young adult books, and a common theme in them is that the main character never had any friends until they met the pick your poison, the quirky best friend, the mysterious love interest, whatever. But this is probably the first time in a book when they actually gave a good excuse as to why they've never had a friend before. I'm not saying that it's logical, and honestly it's downright emotionally abusive, but it's still better than the usual because reasons thrown around in other books. Audrey takes one of the journals and starts to look through it in some vain hope of finding a connection, except that she already knows that the first victim and the man were employed by her father at one point, but that leaves out Miss Chapman, although Audrey seems to think that she didn't know her killer and that the others did. Audrey then starts to go to her father's office, but somebody knocks on the front door just then. Audrey returns to where she'd left Thomas. A footman comes in to say that there's a man with a message from Uncle and that it's urgent. Uncle's manservant comes in and says that Uncle has been arrested for all of the murders. There is a witness, but I'm pretty sure that she's simply confused investigating a murderer with being the actual murderer. I've seen enough crime dramas to say one thing about this. We're currently on page 78 of 193. It's too early to solve the murder right now. I'm fairly certain that this isn't suddenly going to go into the legal system. Thomas and Audrey spring into action and leave at once before Uncle is hanged, but Audrey has to snap at Thomas for daring to order the servants to fetch the carriage, because that's really important right now, clearly. They hurry over to Uncle's house where they find the police tearing the entire house apart. Audrey demands to know why they're doing this. One of the officers says that he believes that Uncle did not do this, but that the order came from the very top, and that his hands are tied. There's a lot of faffing about that adds nothing to the actual plot, which isn't any different from the rest of the story so far. But eventually, the officer says that he'll escort them inside and try to explain why it is that they suspect Uncle of having committed the crimes, and that things are not looking good for Uncle. Well, at least something is happening. Finally. Thanks for listening to my book Snark on YouTube. If you're enjoying this, please hit that subscribe button. I post a new Snark video every Monday. But if you're eager for more Snark, you can check out my review of the plan. If you've already seen that, then you can head over to Tumblr for my main book Snarks. If all of that is still somehow not enough for you, then you can become a patron supporter for just $1 a month and read a bunch of bonus Snarks that isn't up anywhere else. See you next week, guys!